All right, again, welcome. We'll give everyone a couple of more minutes to pop in. All righty. So I'll just begin before we do introductions, just to remind everybody and to let our crowd know that we appreciate you coming tonight, and we definitely appreciate our alums and our partners for being on our panel this evening. This is a part of our Career Networks. The Career Networks is a one-stop shop for students to learn about healthcare careers throughout the healthcare ecosystem. We have 3 pillars, and this is part of our Explore pillar. And we also have our Connect and our Educate that you can go on and learn a little bit, actually it's learn, and you can learn a little bit more, by taking some grab and go materials. But tonight we are so excited to have our Pharmaceuticals and Life Science panel. And we have panelists from a number of companies and backgrounds. And we will start tonight with having our panelists introduce themselves. And I'm going to start with Grace.
Hi, everyone. I'm Grace. I graduated from the PharmD MBA dual degree program at UNC in 2021. So I'm pretty fresh out of the program, so I can answer any class related questions or anything you have as far as internships and recruiting. But really happy to be here and answer any questions.
Awesome. Thanks, John.
Hey, everybody. John Strapp. I'm the managing director of the Kinetix Group, which is a healthcare consultancy. We focus a lot on practice transformation and healthcare innovation, with life science being a significant partner and client. I received my master's in business years ago back at the NYU Stern School of Business. And over my healthcare career, as the rise of alternative payment models and quality came to the forefront, I really recognized an opportunity to leverage that payment model to improve the care of all patients. And that motivated me to enroll in the Doctor of Public Health program at Gillings, which I completed very recently. So happy to discuss that further and share about my experiences, but thrilled to be here. Thank you.
And hey, everybody, my name is Sadhana Chanduri. Nice to meet you all. I'm class of 2018. I came out of school and went to GlaxoSmithKline, in which I am just wrapping up my 4-year rotational program through marketing and market access. I love business school. Prior to business school, I actually got a master's in public health as well. So I used business school to go from public sector healthcare to private sector healthcare. And I was just sharing with the panelists that what I think my claim to fame is that the case competition that currently goes on, that was my doing, that was my baby in business school. So we kicked it off, I think my second year, and I hear it's going pretty well. So excited to hear how it goes this year.
Terrific, thank you. And Sadhana, I believe you still are on the website somewhere. Now that you popped up, I'm like, you look so familiar. I probably
That's hilarious.
So it's kind of neat how your archives survive you at UNC. So again, we welcome our panel. So the format will be, I'll ask a couple of moderated questions of our panelists, and then I open the floor up to our audience to ask questions. So again, to get my attention, you can raise your digital hand, you can unmute, and that will allow me to be able to kind of have you join the conversation. But first of all, I'd like to ask our panelists, and again, too, you guys can popcorn around, you can come back and add in, don't feel that you're structured just to one answer, but what steps did you take in kind of a larger sense to get to the role in which you are now?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick it off. I mean, I think it really just staying very curious and always looking to seek out new information has been indispensable in advancing my career. I mean, that really probably led all of us to, getting an advanced degree. And healthcare is, as we all know, so complicated, so fluid, and so multifaceted. It really necessitates you staying on top of the changing healthcare landscape. And I think that's been an area where I've been fortunate, where not only through some of my engagements, it's kind of forced me to see how the puck is moving, as they say, but also just remaining really curious and ensuring that I'm trying to get as much information as I can. And you've got this dual responsibility here of not only sort of understanding the business side of healthcare, but the science as well. So I think having a curiosity and seeking out information constantly has been really helpful to me.
So for me, I would say that I came to business school to explore. And I knew that business school wouldn't be the end of my exploration journey. Now, that means a lot of things for a lot of people. Exploring can really send you a lot of different directions. So I knew that I needed a North Star. And so my North Star was public health. What can I do that stays true to my public health roots, but still lets me explore? And so I considered consulting. I considered all the rotational programs for all the organizations that come to UNC campus for recruiting. And I mean, I chose what I chose because I thought it would give me the most breadth, and I can attest to the fact that it has so far. And I don't think my exploration journey is done. I think I have a lot more to go, but I continue to stay on the path towards my North Star, which is making sure I explore within the public health sphere.
Awesome.
Yep,
Thank
and I
you.
totally agree with what everyone said as far as exploring and being curious. I think for me, as far as my background, I was really interested in drug delivery systems. So I did some of that research in college. And what I really felt was missing was that human element. And part of the reason why I went to pharmacy school was that I really wanted to be on the patient side of things. And what business school allowed me to do was explore not only, like mentioned by John, the science aspect. So thinking and digging through the thoughts of how can you bring a drug delivery system in a commercial sense to life. So that's kind of what drove me into working not only in like the pharmaceutical industry, but also still having the ability to be really collaborative, have that human element, talking to patients in ad board settings and things like that. So that's kind of what drove me to my current role at BMS.
Terrific. And again, too, as we ask more questions, we'll probably take a few steps back, beyond your latest role and some other areas. And that leads to my next question, which kind of, when you go into a program, there are sets of skills that it's suggested that the curriculum provides for you and that you need to learn, and that could be for your MBA or for a professional school. But in reality, can you guys tell us what skills, abilities, and experiences do you regularly employ to help you do your work on a daily basis, either now or through your growth to where you are at this point in time?
I can start. So for me, I would say collaboration and adaptability are like the two that come to mind. So this past year in my current role, we were able to launch a drug that became FDA approved at it was April 23rd. And with that in mind, there was a ton of preparation that had to come, but at the same time, we had to stay incredibly nimble and adaptable because we didn't know when we were going to get FDA approved. And so with that in mind, collaboration was really key as well, just because we were operating not only across the commercial side of the business, but also the medical side. So how are we bringing those package inserts into a lot of the marketing materials we were making? How do we drive the website and after approval, drive traffic to the website and provide patients all the information that they need and have it to be really accessible? So we were constantly getting into the mind of what do we need to prepare before a launch. And so I would say, like, coming back to the two skills that are really important would be that active collaboration piece, and then also the ability to be really adaptable.
So I would say there are a couple of things that I definitely use today. One is, I mean, you talked about the healthcare competition. It kind of came from a space of, we work with a lot of different types of people in healthcare who have different professions, and they all suddenly have to work under the same roof. How do we do that? And it was kind of a hunch that it would be very interesting to work with a lot of different people. It certainly was in business school, and now I have to do that every day. I work with our medical folks, legal folks, regulatory folks, other marketing people, folks who are very senior, people who are just starting out like myself, and just getting that crude reminder in business school, I think, is great because it's so very real when you come to the real world. That's not a surprising one. I think if you've worked prior to business school, then you know that to a certain extent. But I think when we think about healthcare, we think, oh, everyone's on board with the same thing. Let's help patients get better. Turns out everyone has a different angle that they're coming from. So that learning from business school is helpful to have. The other piece is just, in school, we learn when we do case competitions or case studies or whatever it may be, in our projects, we get specific problems with specific guidelines, and then we go. And sometimes our professors give us really specific guidelines, and sometimes they don't. And turns out in real life, we tend to not get too many guidelines, and we have to work through that ambiguity often. Over the last couple of years, I worked on GSK's COVID medication, helped to launch that. And I mean, it's COVID. Who knows anything about it, anything about the disease, the treatment, anything like that. So it was, again, another crude reminder that real life is very vague and ambiguous, and you kind of have to know how to work through it. Certainly something I learned in business school.
Yeah, those are great points. I guess if there's anything to add, which I think is complementary to the comments, is that, in business school, I concentrated a lot on finance, a lot on entrepreneurship, on accounting, a lot of the sort of nuts and bolts. I probably didn't spend as much time on management and leadership as I would have liked. And that is a balance that I continue to try to strike every single day. And even if I think back of my day today, I probably spent half my day in kind of a manager type of role where I'm digging deep into project plans and roles, responsibilities, task grids. And then the other half of the day, I'm thinking strategically about the development of a new offering to drive our business forward. So I think that it's an elusive balance to strike, but certainly thinking a lot about your role as a manager and your role as a leader is probably something that you'll have to have an opportunity to incorporate each and every day. And it's a great challenge, but it's an elusive balance.
Terrific. These are just fabulous suggestions. And again, too, the focus on so many different areas, but when you think about it, it just kind of boils down to that, the collaboration, almost the soft skill pieces. Although the quant is so important, those finance classes, but when you think about it, it's the people part and it's the management part. So thank you for sharing. Those were just terrific suggestions for students, maybe to take a little bit deeper dive into. So I'm going to open up to our audience. At this point in time, do you have some questions to ask? I was going to say, I know you do, because we get a lot of questions. So I'd love to hear some of these experts.
I can ask a question based on John's last comment there.
Great.
Yeah, I'm trying to be mindful about how much to work on the soft skills. It's hard right now in the midst of all the core classes. How would you advise going about being intentional with developing the soft skills when leadership opportunities are maybe a little bit more limited during school?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's hard because you don't want to sort of stray from, your core work and be distracted from it. But, fortunately, there's a lot of information at our fingertips. And if you think about different content as it relates to effective management and to effective leadership, it's probably there for you. I mean, certainly, there's lots of podcasts that you might be able to access. Certainly, there's a lot of books, but I'm not going to advocate for you to do additional reading on top of your core courses. But if you're able to access that type of content kind of on the side when you have an opportunity, that might be useful. And then also during your curriculum, you're going to be interacting with your colleagues. And in those interactions, there will be roles where they'll be somewhat managerial in nature, and there'll be opportunities for you to demonstrate leadership. So I think you can really work on that framework now, even through your core courses.
That's terrific advice. I was going to say, Sadhana, the fact that you got involved in creating something new for students was leadership and management. So I'll pass it back to you.
I was just going to say, get involved, get involved with whatever you can. There's so many opportunities that the school provides that, I mean, while you're in it, there's so much, it can almost be overwhelming. And sometimes it can feel like busy work or extra work. Turns out, when you find the thing that you want to focus on, it can be really valuable. I mean, I've heard so many good stories from people who did STAR, people who did VCIC, I think it's called. I mean, there's so many, I can't even name them, and I don't even remember them all anymore, but there's a lot. So I'm with you. The core courses are tough and it's hard to think about anything else, but the break comes. And when that break comes, take that break to, think about other extracurricular opportunities.
And definitely, even as a first year, there are liaison positions with the clubs. Get involved, any place you can. Just ask, hey, do you need anybody, to help out with a research project? You can ask your professors. There are other places on campus like Innovate UNC, a lot of other centers that do a lot that connect to healthcare. So poke around, get to meet people. IPEP is a great way to reach out as well, that you can actually start today. All right, we had a question in the chat, and this is, and I'm hopefully correct me if I'm wrong, Ayuranke, and I'm a junior and looking for summer internships within life sciences. Any recommendation in looking and how to obtain them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think as a junior, this is definitely the time to start looking at internships, because as you think about like what kind of internship you want, then you can start applying probably around the early spring time frame so that you could set something up for the summer. I think during this time, what you can do is think about what kind of life science internship you would want. Like, would you want to work on the business side? Would you want to work more on the medical side? Are you interested in pharmaceuticals and drug products, or are you more interested in potentially devices or medical devices? Those can also kind of fit under that life science umbrella. There's also consulting. So that's a really, like, healthcare consulting is a growing industry, always looking for interns as well. So I think narrowing down like specifically what kind of internship you're seeking, but at the same time, I wouldn't limit yourself to a certain company or a certain type part of the life science, just because you're a junior now, you're in that exploratory phase. So I would stay pretty open, but at the same time, kind of figure out where you want to prioritize your time as far as applying for internships.
Terrific. John?
Yeah, I mean, there's Grace, I think that was perfect. There's very little to add, but I would just encourage you to really think about why you're interested in this space and be able to articulate it in a way that will get the attention, of organizations that are looking for interns. I think it was beautifully said before about public health as the North Star, or whatever the why is in terms of your interest in pursuing the sector. To be able to kind of get your elevator pitch for that would be useful.
Along the same lines, John, like what you said, you have to have your why. This is going to sound silly, but have your story down, whether your story is what you're going to do forever or not. Does it have a story to tell about why you are where you, or why you want to be where you want to be next? And once you get there, the good news is, while you're young, you can ask all the stupid questions you want and no one will fault you for it, because they know that you're new, and you can ask whatever you feel like and learn, and maybe you come out of it deciding this one isn't really for me, but that's okay. That's the kind of thing you can do when you start out. Certainly as a junior, you can absolutely do that. And honestly, people appreciate that you're asking questions and that you're curious. But it's true. You may not know what's going on, but you have to act like you know what's going on right when you show up. In that interview, you have to have a story and you have to seem really confident about it, even if it's not what you're going to do for a very long time.
Again, fantastic advice. And I popped into the chat, first of all, the Career Networks platform, and in that there is a connect button, and in that connect button you can start talking to people, and that is a really great way to start just kind of increasing your network. This is something I have to con a lot of folks into, because especially in the sciences area, it's nerve-wracking at first, but the more people you meet, the more people you talk to, the more people they'll introduce you to. So please go on the Career Networks. And secondly, there is a general UNC Career Services, and I popped that in there as well. And there should be someone in medical and life sciences professions for whom you can connect. So make sure you do that. But thank you, panel. That was fantastic and great question as well. So I'm going to open it up again. Any more questions at this juncture? Okay, so we're going to dive into our next question. So again, we talked about your skills, abilities that you feel you use regularly. Now, as folks that hire people, what do people in your organizations really look for in candidates? What are those really positive things that you see immediately within either like applications, resumes, and then in an interview process, or in that networking and meeting folks?
At GSK, I think the formula is pretty easy. It's, you either have to have the passion or you have to have the experience. It's one or the other. And then you've got to have great star stories. That is it. And so if you haven't, I know star is not that something everyone learns about everywhere, but if you haven't heard about it yet, Google it. It is literally the foundation of our interviews. We have a form that says STAR, and we fill out exactly what the person said in their star responses. So if you can nail those star stories, and you can nail, if you don't have the experience, then you can prove that you have the passion for healthcare. Or if you have the experience, you can show your passion for healthcare through it. That'd be great.
Awesome, thank you. Grace or John?
Yeah, I guess I would add, thinking to recent individuals that we've hired, certainly we try to assess a cultural fit. As a kind of smaller organization, I would consider ourselves pretty flat. So there has to be a kind of can-do spirit. If that isn't evident, it's just not a good fit, and it's not good for either the employee or the employer. And then also the fact that we're in this business of healthcare, there has to be aptitude demonstrated on both sides of that fence, or at least the ability to gain that aptitude. So it is sort of that quant and qual that we're generally looking for. I'd say those are the main things. And again, I can't emphasize, at least in our organization, the need of that sort of positive can-do spirit. We have to come out in order to be a good match.
Yeah, nothing to add on my end. Yeah, I think that the glass half full mentality makes a big difference, and also just being able to show initiative, especially when starting out in your career. Like, I know we throw around the word innovation, but actually being a team player within your team and being that indispensable partner, where at least coming from a rotational program, having being those additional hands on deck, but at the end of the day, your manager saying like, I don't know what I did without you on the team. So just making sure that you are not only playing your role, but innovating, going above and beyond, taking initiative, things like that really will set you apart.
Terrific. And can I extend this further? So how can students practice kind of the star stories, or the, that passion? How can they practice, kind of getting that story, really down pat for interviews, et cetera?
Honestly,
practice.
Yeah. Just practicing with your friends, doing mock interviews over and over again. So for some people, they like writing out their answer. Some people like having a little matrix that, that gets you the star story for the right type of question. Whatever it takes for you to be clear and concise and know exactly what your answer is. And I agree. I think it's really just practice that'll get you there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and always think about like what kind of story you want to tell and like your general trajectory. I think making that really clear will be really important to any employer, just because at a certain point in your career, you may be pivoting into healthcare completely, or you do have a background in healthcare, but it could be you kind of may have gotten to life sciences in a different way. So I think really show your uniqueness as a candidate by really explaining your story in a succinct, but also a way that really showcases who you are.
And I think along the lines of the suggestion of practice, there was also the prior suggestion of getting involved. I'd really encourage this group to not have this discussion as a one-off, have this discussion potentially as a springboard, and, think about your career, think about the direction that you want to go, and identify, some of the areas and skills that you want to develop, and then practice and then work on it. And, reach out to people in industry. They're pretty receptive.
Awesome. What skills, or are there skills or experiences that you wish you had gained when you had that opportunity, when you were in more of like that student part of your life, that maybe you feel like you've gained those skills later, but you wish you had done that a little earlier?
I have a skills answer, and then I have an experiences answer. Is there an experience question coming later? What
Nope,
experiences
both
do I
of those,
wish?
yeah, this could be skills
Okay.
or experiences. Perfect.
So skills wise for me, it was finance. And that is totally a personal thing. I kind of thought to myself, I want to be in marketing. Why do I need finance? Let me just get through my core classes and move on with my life. Turns out I certainly need to know finance to do forecasting today. So I would say, take those core classes seriously. You never know when it is suddenly something that you need to do, even though that's not your focus at work. More than that, though, I would actually say experiences or two that I always think back on that I wish I'd done. One was Star Consulting. It's just such a great way to learn of a real life problem and help an organization with their solution. My year, there just didn't happen to be any healthcare things. And I said, if it's not healthcare, I'm not doing it. So I didn't. I wish I wasn't so single-minded about it, because I know a lot of people gotten a lot of value out of it. The other piece is, if you have even the tiniest of entrepreneurial bones in you, business school is the best time to try something. It does not need to be big. It can be the smallest thing in the entire world, but you've got some really smart folks around you who can help you build even the smallest of products, the smallest of companies, the smallest of services. And it's just such a fun time to do that. I have, I would say, many entrepreneurial bones in me, but now that I'm out of business school, working for a large corporation, I don't see very many partners around me. So I don't know how to do that. And maybe I'll figure it out someday, right? But business school is just such a perfect place where all those people are right around you in that moment. So if you've got that in you, just do it.
I'll jump on that comment because I think it's a fantastic one. Even take it a step further. If you've got the interest, if you've got the motivation, write a strategic plan or write a business plan. The strategic planning process and the business planning process really encapsulates all of the skills that you're getting exposure to. And there's no better way to leverage all of those skills by doing it. So you have the opportunity, try to identify something that you're passionate about, and go ahead and write a strategic plan and a business plan for it. I think it will be invaluable.
Grace, did you feel you missed out on anything?
Yeah, so I was really trying to think. I think that I knew I wanted to do healthcare, but something that was important to me too, similarly to I feel like how this panel is structured, is the venture capital entrepreneurial side. I would say I was able to do this, and I wouldn't trade that for the world, was doing the global immersion elective. Like I know that's specific to the MBA program, but get out there, get the global experience. There's a lot of business happening internationally. So it really opened my eyes to the differences of how business works abroad. So I would say that's something that I was able to do, but I wouldn't miss out on while you're in this time in business school. And also, I think the other part is I was able to get really close with the people that were in my particular class, but something that I think would have been cool would just be to get to know the classes above me or below me, depending on what year I was. Just because what I really appreciated about the experience is like everyone's coming from different backgrounds. People are interested in real estate, finance, accounting, consulting. Like there's so many diversities and opinions. They're coming from different places in the country. So really utilize the time to not only build your network when it comes to the corporate sense, but also with your classmates and a lot of the people that you'll be building communities with like longer term. So I would say those would be my two things that I would make sure to utilize in your time in business school.
Again, terrific advice. And there are so many opportunities. And even nowadays for undergrads to kind of go global. So again, everybody dip in and look at some of those things that might be a little outside of your comfort zone, but those are important. Any questions? So I'm going to open it up to the crowd again. Again, this is really important. So, oh, we've got a great one here from Nikhil. And what are some of the best online resources, websites for students to learn about the US biopharma industry? You just took my last question away, but we'd love to hear that. So what does our panel use every day? Or even just, periodically, what gives you the information that you need to know?
So just from a news standpoint, I use Fierce Pharma, which I can put in the chat. But this just gives you like what's happening on a news level. So like your current events. But otherwise, I think that I really learned the most in the industry by doing things like this, talking to a panel, talking to people that have been in the industry for a while. Specifically in pharma, you have, like mentioned before, that commercial side where you're working on commercializing the product, but then there's also the medical side, which is all the research and development that goes into the product. So really exploring the two major sectors, but at the same time, there are other sections of pharma that like business development or regulatory that can also be of interest to people who are looking to get into life sciences. I think that as far as like podcasts and things, How I Built This obviously is a really good one because that's focused on how entrepreneurs are able to build their from the ground up, their product from the ground up. So I've heard like the Dyson one, Away Luggage, like all of that has been really inspirational to me. And then I also listened to the Skinny Confidential, which is another podcast that's focused on entrepreneurship and business as well. Those are less geared towards pharma. I think there were some like Ritual Vitamins had like a series on there too, but just understanding healthcare and wellness as a whole can really help you understand like what other life science sectors there are out that exist outside of like pharmaceuticals. So those would be a couple of things that come to mind.
I'm learning from you, Grace. What was that? Skinny what?
Oh yeah, the Skinny Confidential.
Thanks. So I'd echo what Grace said. Fierce Pharma, I think, is a lot of folks' go-to. I follow something called Drug Channels. It's run by this guy, Adam Fine. It's a really great resource. So it's a website, and you can get newsletters from them. You can also follow him on LinkedIn or Twitter. He's just an expert in this space who understands how healthcare is consolidating 20 different ways, vertically, horizontally. He has a really good understanding of PBMs, which I'm sure you've heard of, but most of us don't really understand what that means. He's just a great resource to understand the healthcare industry as a whole. He does go in vast detail, so sometimes it can be a little overwhelming, but I just find him to be incredibly helpful. From a podcast perspective, I listen to Public Health on Call. I think the Hopkins School of Public Health does episodes weekly. They're pretty short, 10-15 minutes, but they just, cover whatever the latest is in healthcare from a public health perspective. I find that pretty interesting.
Yeah, not much to add. I consume some of those media sources. Stat News is another one where I get some information on a pretty regular basis. I think that is kind of in the same category of Fierce Pharma. For me, not only am I trying to keep tabs on biopharma, but again, trying to keep tabs on the different healthcare stakeholders and sort of everything that's happening with value-based care. So Health Affairs has a good podcast that I'll listen to. From an association standpoint, I think it's AJMC is another association where I'll get some information. America's Physician Groups is a really good resource regarding some of the changes, and they're a real advocate for advancing value-based care. And then again, I try to consume some pretty scientific media just to stay on top of that. And I have to confess, this is something my family loves to mock me on. But when COVID started, it just became clear to me that mass media, might not deliver the information that I would like to receive. So there's a podcast called This Week in Virology, and it's been around forever. And they just dive like an hour and a half, 2 hours into viruses on a weekly basis. So when we're in the car and I throw it on, my children are not pleased, but it has been a great resource, certainly during COVID, to get the perspective of virologists. So anything like that, if there's a particular area of science that you want to dive into, I'd also advocate trying to learn through some of those podcasts.
Yeah, I have to say, anytime I had a question about like, what is this? It was so much easier for me to go to like my podcast app or Spotify and just search it and find a podcast and listen to it than go to Google and have to go through all these resources and try to figure it out. It was just so much more interesting to have someone talk to me about it and give me an overview. So, I strongly recommend if there's anything like what is Medicare A, B, C, D, there's definitely a podcast for it.
Absolutely. And we are actually working right now to compile all of these resources, and we'll have a tab on our career networks because these are also valuable. And yeah, it's funny, I was just looking up because there's fierce pharma, but there's fierce everything, like, so fierce life sciences, et cetera, but fierce biotech. So there are just so many, but I love that idea of just kind of digging through, finding some podcasts, and like you can just hear content wherever you are, whenever you wish to hear that. So those are fantastic. So I know that answered our question, but so I'm going to backtrack a little bit, but first I'm going to open it up to the crowd because I think that probably did maybe open up a few questions, as we're starting to think about the larger ecosystem and what, you've got to be dynamic and kind of know what the landscape is as it changes. So any questions right now from our audience?
I actually have a question. I'm Alana and I'm a dual PharmD MBA. And while I have many interests in careers that I feel like I might want to pursue, I feel like there's just so many options. And so I'd love to know, what do all of you do in your day-to-day job?
Yeah, for sure. So I can start out. I'm also, I did the UNC PharmD MBA program. And for me on my day-to-day, so I work at BMS right now. I'm part of a rotational development program. I knew, similar to you, I didn't 100% know exactly what sector of pharma I wanted to be in. I just knew that I wanted to be in like a LDP or leadership development type program to help me figure that out. With that in mind, on my day-to-day, so my first rotation was actually on a COVID project. So BMS also similarly had a COVID asset. So we were thinking about how do we bring this COVID product to market. So my day-to-day then was really around monitoring all the COVID news, talking to potentially different stakeholders, creating like an end-to-end strategy. So like, we had talked to Amazons, we had talked to Walmart to figure out how do we get patients tested and treated. So that was a little bit on the business development side, thinking about partnerships, but it was a really cool opportunity. And then I'm currently in my second rotation now, and coming off of this rotation, I was working on a first-in-class treatment for obstructive hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. So it was super interesting because there's no other product in market for OHCM. So pre-launch, we were talking to patients as far as what do you think about this brochure? How do you think that HCM patients will see this brochure? But then at the same time, like asking them to like, how would you, like, what kind of content would you want to see on the website? Things like that. But also working with legal and regulatory to make sure that we were checking off all the boxes there from a legal standpoint and a regulatory standpoint. So right now, since we were able to successfully launch the drug at the end of April, I've been working closely with our third-party vendors to make sure to troubleshoot anything as far as how patients are being enrolled on the website, how materials are actually doing. So I'm actually going into the field, which is talking to HCPs one-on-one and getting a sense of what are the types of questions you're getting from patients? Like, do you feel like everything that we've been able to provide makes sense? So it's really coming off that launch and making sure that things are working according to plan. But again, I'm more focused on the marketing side. Through the rotational program, I know I want to do US marketing, and I wouldn't have been able to know that unless I did like an LDP or like a rotational development program.
Mine's very similar to Grace, so I'll go next. I'm about to wrap up my 4th rotation. And so I've done similarly 3 rotations in marketing. I'm now in market access, which is more focused on payers and, you know, just everything but the HCP, if you will. I would say similarly, you know, worked on some launches, some products that have been around for a while in the US, internationally. And I mean, similar to you, there's so many things in the healthcare space that you'd want to do. I was not ready to find a specific role and stick to it. So the rotational program just really scratched that itch of exploration for me. And yeah, I'd say if you can find one, definitely go for it.
Alana, the only thing I would add is, aside from which sort of sector you want to concentrate on, you know, also think about size of organization and big versus small. And this is probably a gross oversimplification, but you know, when you think big, you're going to get access to tremendous resources, access to tremendous training. You know, you certainly will be provided a lot of the tools that you need to advance your career. If you go small, you'll have the sort of bandwidth to potentially explore things, but the exploration will be on you. And I think that, you know, there's no right or wrong or better or worse. It just depends on who you are and what your interests are. But I think size of organization is probably something else that you want to consider aside from the specific path within the healthcare space.
Another difference that I found between small and big, which I wish I'd thought about earlier, is that if you go to a small organization, your lane of work is like, it's massive, right? When you go to a large organization, your lane is this small. And it doesn't matter how many rotations you do, every time your lane will be this small, and it'll grow over time. But you know, if you're looking for more variety in your day-to-day, if you're looking to learn a whole lot in a short period of time, maybe a smaller organization would be a better option. But if you are looking for some of that classical training, then yeah, that's certainly what a large organization would provide.
These are, again, terrific responses. And Alana, great question. And I don't mean to sound life coachy, but it really is important as you are in school to start kind of, it doesn't have to be a journal, but I made a matrix and I started putting down, what do I really like? What gets me excited? You know, which classes are really, you know, oh, wow, that looks like something I could do for a couple of hours a day. And then the more people you talk to in that matrix, you know, their roles, et cetera, you can start putting check marks. And so before you know it, you start to have a really good picture of, oh, I'd really like to do this, or maybe something over here might be interesting. So again, these are great suggestions, CLDPs, leadership development programs, rotations, I think are also another great way to do some exploration. All right, so Matt, do you have a question?
Yeah, it's just a real quick follow up off of Alana's. I'm also a PharmD MBA in Alana's class. I realized that like work-life balance is like really important to me, and so that's kind of what like pushed me away from like the traditional consulting route of like working for one of the big consulting firms. I just didn't know with the rotational programs, the leadership programs, is the work-life balance like a normal 40 hours a week, Monday through Friday, or do you find yourself like spending a lot of time on the weekends or after hours? And I guess it probably depends on the size of the company as well. I feel like a smaller company, you wear up many more hats, so you end up spending a lot more time outside the normal work hour. But I just didn't know if anybody had experience with that.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak on BMS. I know that it might be different for other companies, but I would say work-life balance in my current leadership development program is definitely very balanced. Like, I think that we do have the set 9 to 5 schedule, but like for the summers, we have things called summer Fridays, where between I think it's like after June, Memorial Day and Labor Day, we have like Friday afternoons that are reserved for like summer Fridays. So that definitely helps. I think with the LDP programs too, they have set amounts of vacation set aside. I would say talking to all of my managers, that has never been a problem. Like, they totally understand that there are weddings you need to go to, or there are vacations with family. And it's just making sure that you're able to prioritize your well-being as well. And that mental health piece is really important. So I think, at least from my experience, that it's definitely been work-life balance there.
Yeah, I'd say the same at GSK. I'd say too, I have a husband, I had a kid the last year. I have to do daycare drop-offs and pickups and things, and my company understands that. There's never a question about it. If I have to take a call virtually, if I have to stay home for the day, if we all have COVID and I can't show up to work for 2 weeks, that is very understood. I do think GSK is very much a family company. I do think, however, it's kind of on you to decide where in the organization you want to go, depending on the work-life balance you're seeking. So if you're looking for, if you've got a couple of years or you've got a lot of time on your hands, go for those launch type roles, right? Those will be more intense. Working on COVID, I did work 16 hours a day. But I no longer work on that COVID team. I work on a much easier team, and therefore my work-life balance is easier. So, all in all, I think I would say most large pharma companies tend to have good work-life balance, but you get to choose within that organization how hard you want to work.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think from my observation, generally, I'd say this sector has pretty good work-life balance. At one point, our office is here in downtown Manhattan, and down the street, we had a client, and it was conducting healthcare research for the financial community, and that was imbalanced. I will say that. So I'd say generally the sector, you've got the balance, but if you're focused on that, don't go to a healthcare investment bank.
Yeah, finance isn't my strong suit to begin with, so I don't think I'll be pursuing that, but thank you all for your answers.
Absolutely fantastic. And so since we kind of answered the existing moderator question, I'm going to throw one out. And again, feel free to take a second to think about it. But I'm really interested to know what's exciting you about what you see of the future of healthcare right now. Is there anything that you're just like, wow, yeah, that's something I really want to dig into?
At least for me, so I know a lot of you guys are looking for internships and thinking about internships, and something that I really like the current events question, because this was actually an interview question that I had, was what is something that's super exciting that's coming in, that's currently in the news when in regards to life sciences and pharmaceuticals. And something that I answered and I'm still very interested in is there's obviously like 3D printing, and that's been a big topic of discussion, but there's also been like 3D printing when you think about delivering drugs at home. So kind of eliminating all the middlemen that go into it and actually having a designated printer to print your drugs every month. I think that was exciting just because, like, think coming back to my experience in drug delivery, it's like, how can you bring the patient the care that they need, and also from an adherence standpoint, help with that aspect. And obviously there's like legal and regulatory imbalances that will have to come into play with something like this, but I think that that was exciting to me because it kind of steps outside even the delivery. There's a lot of obviously pharmaceutical, like pharmacy deliveries, but how can we think about the future of that? And maybe it is like printing your drugs at home.
I'll mention two things. One is, I've been passionate about the promise of value-based payment models really since the Affordable Care Act was enacted and the Center for CMMI was created. Certainly it's been, I would say slow going, but I think there's great promise there, and I think that has a great future. So from a macro standpoint, that's something I'll mention. The other thing I'll mention, I am completely blown away with some of the artificial intelligence tools that are becoming available. There's an organization called OpenAI, and they've created a GPT-3 tool, which basically can create text and summarize. And honestly, they're not even sure of its own capabilities. It's amazing. And they also have created a tool called DALL-E, which creates images. So I would pay attention to AI. It's inevitable. It's going to really penetrate healthcare in a really meaningful way. That's something that just when we kind of mess around with it with colleagues here, we just shake our heads, are speechless at some of the things it could do.
Yeah, I'd say similarly, just there's so much technological innovation that folks are trying to bring to market in the healthcare space. But as I'm sure some of you have seen, some of the largest companies in the world are trying to get into healthcare and can't seem to figure it out. And so I'm excited to see who does, who cracks the nut of pricing, who cracks the nut of making customer experience way better than it currently is in healthcare. That's where that's what my eyes are on these days. And sometimes it comes from the government, right? Like just recently, the Inflation Reduction Act just passed a bunch of Medicare redesign and a bunch of other pieces that really changed the way that pharmaceutical companies in particular can get their drugs out there. So some of it's regulation coming from the government, but then some of it is, just really cool and new ideas. So lots happening. I can't wait to see who actually cracks the nut.
Absolutely. Oh, those are all fantastic. You could all see everybody's faces like, oh yeah, I want to know that. And then maybe you all, panel included, will solve some of these problems, or at least be in on solving or bringing some of these again to that base of patients, which are very important to many people, to all people in the healthcare sphere. I just cannot thank our panelists enough. So we're getting really close to witching time at 7, and everybody would like to probably get a little rest, but thank you, panel, for taking the time tonight. Again, bringing to life for our audience what you do, your passion in doing it, and those little intricacies. I actually wrote, I was like, this is just such terrific advice. I really wish that we could just, have every student sit in on all of these panels, but we're so glad that our audience did come to join us tonight. So thank you, audience, as well. And again, we have, speaking of AI, we have an AI company, noon to 1 on Friday, which will, it's very interesting. It's a newer hire who's going to interview her president of her company. So if you ever wanted to know what people want to ask the president of their company, come and join us for N1 Health in our fireside chat. So again, thank you, panel. Thanks, Erin. She coordinates everything and we all just show up, and thank you, audience. And we hope to see you guys again really soon. And please email with any questions you might have. And if you would like the contact information for any of our panelists. Awesome. So good night, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.